So for the Automoblox car, we will have to create a number of sub-assemblies. There'll be a total of 4 sub-assemblies and then one final assembly to bring everything together. So these are the 4 assemblies. There's one. That's going to be the bed assembly for the back, the front assembly. We have the passenger section in the middle. That's the passenger assembly, includes the windshield. And then there's going to be a wheel assembly, which we'll use 4 times. And then finally, we'll bring everything together. There are these connector pieces right here that will finally bring the assemblies together. So let's try to see what the assembly is about. I'm going to start off with this one. I'll show you how to use mate commands or mate assembly constraints and insert constraints. What we're going to do is we're going to turn on work planes in these parts and mate their planes so that connector pieces are centered properly. We'll be doing that for this connector piece and this connector piece, as well as here and here. We'll also use some work planes to mate this properly. And one of the other things we'll have to utilize is the idea of turning things, rotating them into position to make it more easy to facilitate. There'll also be a little bit of an offset shown when this windshield is inserted. So we'll get started with this one. I will not be showing you every single step. I'll show you some simple tools to use, and then you can fill in the blanks for assembling all of these sub-assemblies. Okay, so let's start a new file. And if you go new, choose assembly. This is very similar in some ways to Unshape, but in other ways it's very different. There are no mate connectors that we're really going to worry about here. So the first thing you do is you want to place the part that's going to be grounded first. So we're going to work on, just one second, creating this. So we're going to put the bed assembly in first. I'm sorry, the T9 bed. Then we can work on the axles and then the 1 block socket. So I'll place the bed, and notice that the bed is kind of upright and I don't want it like that. So the first thing we're going to learn to do is rotate this into the proper position, because this will be my grounded part. So I'm just going to turn this slightly to see what it looks like. Let's see if that's the front. We are going to, if we look at the axes, you'll notice you want to spin it about the x-axis. So I'll right click and I'm going to rotate on the x-axis, and right now it's upside down, so I'll have to do that 2 more times. And that's the position I want it in. So I'll just left click and place it. And since that's my first part, I'll escape. I don't want to put others. I want to make sure that this is grounded. So right over here in my browser, I want to right click and I want to ground the part. So now this part won't move. Okay, now I'm going to place a new component. I'm going to place the axle, and we're going to need 2 of these. So there'll be one on this side, and it's going to be inserted with those ridges facing the car. And then there'll be one over here, but why don't we go ahead and turn it? And you'll notice it has to spin around the y-axis, the green one pointing up. So we'll right click and we'll rotate on the y-axis, and we'll do that 2 times and then place it and then escape. Okay, so the last thing we're going to bring in, and normally I don't bring in multiple parts at once, but the last thing we would place would be this one socket one block socket. But let me assemble these first, okay? So one of the things that you can do here is, if you don't like the way this is viewed, you can go up here to the View tab and change the style. Sometimes it's easier to see with hidden with edges. So that kind of helps a little bit with the visibility of this. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to insert this into here. Okay, so let me turn this. That's going to get inserted in there. So just so you can get a good view. So we're going to use the mate, go back to assemble, constrain, and this is my configuration. We're going to do an assembly. It's going to be the mate. And there are two choices. There's mate and there's flush. We'll see the differences in a little bit. There's also an angle mate. There's a tangent mate, an insert mate, and a symmetrical mate. We're going to use the insert actually for this, okay? So what I want to do is I want to insert the axle so that it's sitting at the bottom of that. So notice that blue circle you see there. It's going to go right to the bottom, and you also see the axis. And then I have to choose kind of the outer, make sure that's coming from the outer part of this. So that will seat itself right to the bottom. Okay, now I can continue to apply constraints, but right now I'm going to hit OK so that I can show you that this will no longer come out. So the only degree of freedom left is this rotation on the, I guess that's the, let's say the x-axis. It's rotating around the x-axis. So there's 1 degree of freedom left. It can't move in or out, up or down. But I'd rather it not be spinning. So because we're going to be putting a wheel on this, the wheel should spin around it. It should not move. So one way we can keep this from moving is to apply what we call an angle constraint. And it's a little bit tricky. So I can apply an angle between this bottom face here. See that arrow facing down, and the bottom face of this, and make it 0 degrees. And I've got to change it to this directed angle. Okay, so then I only require 2 selections, and I'm setting it at 0. So now you'll see that all the degrees of freedom have been removed. This is not moving at all anymore. Okay, so the other one will be the same thing on this side, and I'll leave that for you. So the next thing we're going to do is place the one socket, the 1 block socket. Okay, and so the 1 block socket, I want to make sure that the 1 block is facing out. So let's see if that is. It is. Okay, so that's perfect. I don't need to spin it or rotate it. And so what I want to do is, this is supposed to be in here like perfectly centered. Okay, so it's really hard to do that, because if I put it tied to one wall, let's say right there, you'll see you're going to get a gap on this side. Okay, let me show you what I mean. If I were to line this up here, I get a gap over here. We don't want that, okay? So what we're going to do instead is we are going to line up the work planes that these were built with. And if we don't have work planes that we like, we can always add work planes in this environment. You can do that by going to 3D model, and you can add work planes here. You could add work axes, work points. Okay, but there are work planes here we can use, all right? So this is going to be the bed. Let me just make sure that my axle, okay, so this is grounded, good. And then this one is fully not moving yet. That's what, not moving anymore, so we've got our dot there. That little pin there, it's hard to see, that's what's the grounded symbol. And then this dot says it's fully constrained. So that first axle is fully constrained, but the second one is not, okay? We always want to make sure we're fully constrained. So let's get this going. What we're going to do is on the one block socket, I'm going to expand this. I'll expand the origin, and I'm going to look for the planes that I want to align, okay? So I want to align that middle plane there, the XZ plane, with the plane in the bed. So I'm going to turn the visibility of this plane on so I can see it. And then up in the bed, if I go to the origin, it's going to be mated to this plane. So I'll turn that one on as well. Okay. So right now we can add a mate between those two planes, and that will kind of set this up so that it slides back and forth on this. So this will be a typical mate constraint, and I'm going to choose that plane. I have to choose it from the edge. And this plane here, which I can also choose from the edge. And notice both arrows are facing up. Look what happens. So it's turned around. So because of the way I selected it, I'll just choose flush. And what that's doing is both arrows will now be facing in the same direction. That's what flush means. And it'll meet up properly. Okay, now this cannot any longer really move up and down. And we can see that if I go to the side view. Actually, let me come around to the other side. Okay, so notice it won't move up and down. It can slide anywhere else, back and forth that way, and also back and forth this way. But it really cannot move up and down. It appears to be, but if I come to the right side, you'll see it really isn't moved up and down. It's just like far away from it now, and it's a little bit distorted seeming. Okay, so bring that back to position. All right, so that's one constraint. We've removed the degrees of freedom. It can't go up and down anymore, but it actually can still spin around. So I don't want it to do that anymore. So I'm going to add another constraint between the middle planes. All right, so we can turn these off now, and instead we will turn on the visibility of this plane. I'll turn this one off and turn on the visibility of this plane. So we are going to add again another mate there, and it hopefully, you know, again it'll be a regular mate. And grab it from the edge, and you'll see it turned it around again. So I'll just do this, and we're okay now. All right, so the only thing left to do on this one, if you notice, is that, let me turn these planes off because they're kind of hard to see with those. Okay, this is still going in and out, right? So it can't go up and down, and it can't go side to side anymore. However, it hasn't really been placed in the right position. So what I would like for this to be, how it should be designed, is that this front face should be flush with this front face. So we're actually going to choose to use the flush command this time. This one, where I choose that face. You can see the arrow preview there. And this face, and both arrows are facing forward. That's what the flush command looks like. And now you will see that there are no degrees of freedom left. This cannot move. And you'll notice that that one block socket has this little dash in front of it, which also says it's fully constrained. It's just done a little bit differently. Okay, so you can finish the axle on that one, and it'll be all done.